Bernard, let's take a look at your ride. The initial statistics, 7 hours and 25 minutes, 176 kilometers, and 456 TSS. That is a monster ride. Um, these long rides can really stay in your legs in terms of the benefit, really good conditioning, and this is going to set you up for the Tour of Cambridge really well. But let's go into a little bit more detail. Um, I've read your comments, so yes, I think great to split the ride into the sections. Um, and those hills are tough. I've ridden up those hills myself. Um, and in terms of the age group, exciting to see where you're going to come. I'll be interested to follow up on that. But I think certainly to have caught up a lot of the riders that set off an hour before you, and to have done the majority of it as a solo time trial is actually quite a big deal because, as you know, sitting on someone's wheel can save you up to 30% of the power. So having done 176 kilometers solo, uh, that's a big ride. Okay, so if we just analyze this in a little bit more detail, I see my computer struggling with it because it's such a big file. Beautiful part of the world, amazing to ride there. But let's look at a couple of things. I'll just remove the other data. Here's your heart rate, and if we put in the zones, we can see that most of the time you're sitting in zone 3, zone 4. So that's good work to have done in your heart rate. If I smooth the heart rate data, we can just see that your heart rate, as you said, in the last hour or so drops off a little bit. And you said yourself that you were feeling pretty tired by then. And you can actually see a similar thing on the power chart. Just take heart rate out of there. So when I've really smoothed the power output, you can see once again that for the first probably that's 5.5 hours. You've maintained quite a lot of power, and then it looks like this final hill. I'm guessing that's what happened there. Yes, this final hill kind of was a bit of a killer, and then just as you said, this one was pretty tough over there. But you're looking at 5.5 hours of 5 hours of work, average power of 190 watts, and normalized power, which is the really key variable at this duration of 240 watts for 5 hours. That's very impressive riding. If we take a breakdown of the power by time, now it's saying that you did nearly 1,000 watts for 2 seconds, and I'd be interested to hear your take on that, because that's a lot of power to be pushing out. Oops, don't want to do that. That's a lot of power to be pushing out for 2 seconds, and just something to bear in mind in terms of the pacing that we've discussed. Even in fact, if you look at your 30-second power, 500 watts for 30 seconds, 437 watts for a minute, that's a lot of power. And those efforts can actually take it out of your legs disproportionate to the time savings that you get from working that hard for that period of time. Your 5-minute power, 327 watts. So that's just something to pay a little bit of attention to. But also in the Tour of Cambridge, with it being a more race, you're actually not going to have the option. So in many ways, it's actually a good thing that you've got these kinds of efforts into your legs for this duration of ride, because it's going to prepare you for a more racy kind of environment, which you're going to be expecting in the Tour of Cambridge. So if we look at the power distribution chart, I'll just take the zeros out, spending most of your time sitting just under 200 watts, but then a big chunk of time across a whole range of power outputs, and then above threshold, you can still see that you spent a fairly large amount of time above threshold. So I can see here you've spent in the total ride, you've spent actually 30 minutes of that, 7% of the ride above 340 watts. Zone 5, you're spending 4%, and Zone 4, you're sitting 8%, 33 minutes. And then your power curve, as I said, with you having put in a 7.5-hour ride, we're not going to be expecting that small intervals within that are going to have major outputs. But even so, 20 minutes, 266 watts, that's quite a lot. And 5 minutes, 327 watts, that's quite a lot also. So, a really impressive ride, really big power output. In terms of the actual time, it's a little bit hard to say because, it's a solo ride. Over a ride of that distance, wind conditions are going to affect your speed so much. The fact that you were, I think you said, 1 minute quicker in the last hour, the last section, despite the fact that you had a headwind, actually does say quite a lot about your fitness. That's pretty impressive, to be riding a similar speed into a headwind as what you were with a tailwind 2 years ago. And then it'll be interesting to see how you did relative to the other people who participated in the race. Let's just have a quick look at your dashboard. So we can see that you are averaging 10 hours a week, and your performance management chart, you're sitting at the moment at a chronic training load of around 90, which is pretty close to when we spoke on the phone. You said you were comfortable with kind of around 93 or so. So you're sitting pretty close there. Your training stress balance for today is quite high because obviously you've tapered, and then tomorrow we'll see it reflect the ride that you've done today. So it's going to kind of plummet pretty low. But that chronic training load, yes, it's been nice and consistent, really. And as we discussed, you can't keep a chronic training load rising forever. You've got to find an optimal state for yourself. And we're looking nice and steady, really, for the last, when's that, since mid-March. So for the last 2 months, that's been good to see. That's your annual one. And here we've got the power outputs relative to your best. So I think this is quite interesting because Tour of Cambridgeshire, probably 5 minutes is going to be more critical. And maybe this is something we should be thinking about for a couple of sessions, is actually putting in a few big 5 minutes, because as you can see, relative to your best, you haven't put in a big 5 minutes for a while. And maybe we should be looking for a big 20 minutes as well. So we can just reflect that in the training over the next few weeks. But overall, I would say, well done, great ride. Nice to see how your performance management chart is looking on, but a little bit of the focus over the next couple of weeks is going to be some high quality work to prepare you for the more racy sort of environment that is going to be Tour of Cambridge.